This meeting is being recorded.
That is so weird. All right. Live from New York, because I need to stop online gambling now that it is officially legal in New York as of today. So I need a little bit of work. My name is Stephen Rabinowitz. It's the first on the Sports Lines of 2022. Spoiler alert. If you're sick of Antonio Brown already in this calendar year, skip the last 12 to 15 minutes of this show. You've been warned. All right, introduce yourselves, gentlemen.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Jay Kaplan.
Hey, good morning. I'm Anthony Strait. And by the way, next week I'm dropping a mixed album also. It's going to have a ton of features on it.
He's not.
He's the only one of the three of us not dropping one.
No, he's not. Anyway,
let's get Callie and Drake. We went in hard at the studio a few weeks ago, man. Check that out.
Oh God! All right, let's get started on this Saturday morning. Welcome. Yes, it's football on your phone, media device, or whichever way you want to talk about football this week, and your computer and your social media platform. We'll talk about the college CFP title game. Week 18, who's the real MVP, and of course, the real MVP of social media this week, AB. But first, we have this thing called an opener. All right, so this happened last Saturday, and I'm going to defend Desmond Howard and Kirk Herbstreit for a minute here. This was said during a college game day at 10 a.m. in the morning that happened after a cross-country flight for a game that ended at midnight at the Orange Bowl in Miami. So blame ESPN for that. But when Kirk Herbstreit says that college players who skip non-playoff games, like the Ohio State wide receivers, because they're meaningless, and they basically said that those people don't love football, and Desmond Howard says that kids have a sense of entitlement, my defense rests. Anthony, with those comments that I just mentioned, there seems to be some low-hanging fruit over the college football, so please swing away.
I mean, the low-hanging fruit would have to be Brian Kelly and Lincoln Riley, who chose the business route and bailed on their teams before a bowl game, because look, this was a definition of grandpa get off my yard or back in my day speeches. Do anybody have to remind Herbstreit and Desmond Howard they haven't played the game in almost 30 years? That days have changed. Okay, look. ESPN, for what it's worth, and the networks they work for, has spent a whole season, and we all watch college game day at some point, promoting the college football playoffs, talking about nauseam, who's in, who's out. Do you really I don't understand, why is it when the players decide to make a business decision and decide, you know what, I don't want to play in the Jimmy Kimmel LA Bowl or the Cheez-It Bowl and risk an injury that may hurt my future draft status? Why is it that when the coaches jump ship, basically lie to their players, abandon their players, and go for more money, it's okay. But when the players decide, I don't want to play in a meaningless bowl game when I could be a projected top 10 pick in the NFL draft, which does affect my money. The game is broken, and it just sounds like sour grapes, because it's look, for over 100 years, everyone has benefited from the college football system except the players. Now the players finally get a little bit of a say in the matter, a little bit of piece of the pie, and now the Herbstreits, the coaches, the old school mentality wants to call foul. And I think it's kind of ridiculous, because it's look, you work for a network who all season have minimized every bowl game, with the exception of the college football playoff, which was the Orange Bowl and the Orange Bowl, and the Cotton Bowl, respectively, and also the Rose Bowl, because the Rose Bowl is still a big deal. You minimize everything else. Not to mention, we have a playoff system in place now, so the other games are virtually just glorified exhibition matches, a cash grabs, if you want to call it that. So I think of Jalen Smith, Matt Cole, earlier this week, guys who are projected top picks who end up suffering a major injury in a bowl game that really didn't count for anything. But I don't understand the judgmental attitude towards players who decide I don't want to risk a further injury and decide to sit it out. I mean, and sometimes not always the players, sometimes the coaches does it too. But I just look at it it's a little hypocritical for Herbstreit and Desmond Howard to point that out. Keep in mind, if Desmond Howard had a chance to not playing a bowl game when he was doing his Heisman Trophy season and realized that he may actually be a top pick and get more money if he avoids injury, I'm quite sure he would have taken that opportunity. But things have changed from the 80s and the early 90s to where it's 2022 now. And the bowl game, a lot of these bowl games are ridiculous. Like nobody wants to play in the Cheez-It Bowl or nobody wants to play in the Pinstripe Bowl in front of 100 people in Yankee Stadium because they decided to hold the game 2:00 in the afternoon on a Thursday afternoon when no one can actually go to the game because we're all working or taking a holiday break. I just think it's silly. It's a little bit it's an out of touch rant for a guy at 10 a.m. Look, if you want your coffee in the morning so you can wake up and get more of a clear thought.
Anthony, I'm just glad you didn't mention the Duke's Mayo Bowl. We're not going to go over that again.
No, that's disgusting. By the way,
let's not. We can talk about that another time. Jay, you know the bowl system very well. You've lived through the bowl system at its biggest peak.
Yeah,
and you're kind of in the same boat.
Yeah, I'm going to give the youngsters out there a bit of a history lesson before I get seriously into the meat of my my angle here. And you're right, Rabbi. I know the bowl system very well, and I've always been critical of it. For me, there's always been too many mediocre teams getting to play in them. So the reward that Howard talks about for having a great season has been diluted for some time now. I'm sorry, guys, but 6-6 is not a great season. It's not even a good season. It's a mediocre season. And in my opinion, mediocrity shouldn't be rewarded with a trip to a bowl game. And because it is and has for too many years now, too many of these bowl games are meaningless games. And because there are so many of these types of bowl games, which exist only to give the broadcast partners inventory to fill their hours, it has lessened the cachet of all of them. And to a certain extent, so has the creation of the CFP and the BCS before it. Remember, guys, when college football really owned New Year's Day, I couldn't wait to get up that morning knowing that the real bowl games would kick off at noon and end till midnight or after. The Fiesta, the Orange, the Cotton, the Sugar, and the granddaddy of them all, the Rose Bowl. Those were bowl games, and they all happened on the same day. The best teams in the nation played in those games, so those games meant something. Now, unless they're one of the semifinal game sites for the college football playoffs, they don't mean as much. And the fact that the national title game is not played in one of those bowl games also lessens things for the entire bowl game experience. I understand it with the money at stake in the NFL at certain players, ones that are pretty much locks to get drafted on day one or day two, are going to look to avoid getting hurt in a bowl game that is not being played to determine the national championship. And I can understand how fans can be annoyed by that. I even understand why Herbstreit is annoyed by that. But to say that these kids that opt out of a bowl game don't love football the same way that Herbstreit and Howard did when they played, I'm sorry, but that's a bridge I can't cross with them. I have a hard time believing that just because a 21-year-old kid is making a business decision to protect his future when he's reasonably assured of a big NFL payday, that means he doesn't love the game. Does the fact that we don't see any of the 100 potential NFL draft picks on the 4 teams that made the CFP opting out mean they love the game more? Does having a chance to play for the national championship make risking injury, draft status, and potential income worth more than just for a regular bowl game? Maybe. Just remember that coaches essentially opt out of bowl games when they bolt for a new school right after regular season ends, even if their previous team is bowl bound. I mean, does that mean the coach loves football less than the coaches that stay? We don't seem to give the coaches who bolt the same level of crap that Herbstreit and Howard gave the players who opted out. Want to make the bowls mean something? Stop having so many of them. Stop rewarding mediocrity. Or, do the smart thing. Expand the playoff field so that more teams have a chance to play for the national title. If more of the top teams have a chance, then maybe more of the top players will opt in, and the old guys will stop with the in my day rants like this.
I agree with you 100% on a bunch of the points, but I do, first of all, the criticism that, by the way, I don't agree with Kirk and Desmond's words one bit. They're stupid, but what they were talking about is the Ohio State wide receivers, Chris Olave being one of them who's going to be a top pick in the draft because wide receivers are almost like diamonds right now in the NFL. But What they were talking about is people missing the Rose Bowl, for God's sakes, and not playing in that. And the fact that that does still mean something to a lot of people. I think it means a lot to Utah and Ohio State. Talk about the schools that just had these great seasons. Utah going to the Rose Bowl. That's something I don't think they ever thought could have happened back in the 2000s. Ole Miss and Lane Kiffin. Anthony mentioned Matt Corral, who did get a small injury in that game. Luckily, it doesn't look like it's going to hurt his draft stock too much. Playing in the Sugar Bowl as a reward for a really good season. I think two things, the dilution of what the bowl system was back in the 90s, so to speak. We'll talk 90s, mid-90s. We'll think 90s, mid-90s about that. Yeah, that's been diluted. But again, the fact that we could actually have a national champion is great. And I think it's something that was necessary to happen in this moving along. I do think that the players need to save themselves for the NFL because that's when they're going to make the most money. There are situations, though, when players like, as I mentioned to you two earlier in the week, and you guys were like saying, what the hell? Jamar Chase literally missed his entire season last year. He opted out due to different reasons, but overall, that's a whole season he missed, and he's been doing pretty damn well in the NFL. So I think these college players are taking college for what it is, and that's perfectly fine. They love football, but they understand being a 7-6 team going into a very, very small bowl and missing that is a lot different. I don't agree with missing some of the major bowls, especially for schools that haven't been to the dance in a while, but it gets out of control a little bit on hand. Maybe we can meet somewhere in the middle. And of course, expansion of the playoff is the best way to do it, but we need to think about the details of that. But that is for a whole nother topic for a whole nother time.
Exactly.
Yeah,
all right, guys.
Next year we're gonna have the Disney Plus and the Netflix Bowl to add to this.
Let me tell you right now, the fact that we've gotten all of these, Dabo Sweetie had a freaking Gatorade bucket full of Cheez-Its thrown on him. Again, I'll mention the Duke's Mayo Bowl, and that's all I'm going to say. The product placement for these bowls was stupid
Cash
this year
grabs.
and worse than before. All right. Trivia question for you guys before we move on. Alabama and Georgia played in the SEC Championship this past year. They did not play in the SEC Championship in 2018 when they played in the college football CFP final. What is the only rematch that has happened in the era of national championships that's since 1998 that was played in the regular season and then played again in the college football national championship?
Alabama, Auburn, 2011, I'm thinking. No.
Nope.
No.
You're close, but no.
Is it an SEC matchup, Rabbi?
Yes, it is. All right, Anthony was the closest. He had one of the two teams. Obviously, Alabama is one of them.
Okay.
It's not Georgia.
No.
Nope. You got one. You get 15 more seconds because this is a visual medium and we don't like people who are thinking. Okay, you're done. LSU.
There you go.
From the year after in 2012. LSU won the regular season matchup and won in 9-6. And then got shut out by Alabama in the national championship.
That's right, the infamous 9-6 game.
It's infamous because it said back offense like 1,000 years. All right, now that I've schooled these gents, it's time to see Georgia and Alabama for the second time in less than 40 days. Time to see who the CFP heavyweight champion of the world is. Back on December 4th, Alabama, who was almost a touchdown underdog, beat Georgia 41-24, and the game was not a 41-24 game. Now they meet in the SEC hotbed of Indianapolis for the Natty. Jay, close your eyes. Remember that game back in Atlanta? Actually, don't. What did Alabama do then that they need to continue now?
All right. Well, no disrespect to outside linebacker Will Anderson, who has wreaked havoc on offenses all season. But if Alabama is going to beat Georgia again, their offense will have to be the reason why. And it does start with Heisman Trophy winning quarterback Bryce Young. Carved up the Dogs defense in the Tide's SEC title game win to the tune of 421 yards and 3 touchdowns on 24 of 44 passing, while adding another 40 yards and a 4th touchdown on the ground. He set an SEC title game record with 461 yards of total offense. The most points the Georgia defense allowed in any game was 17, and the most yards they'd allowed any offense in a game was 387. Bama put up a 41 spot and rolled up 536 yards of offense. They had 24 points and 365 yards of offense at the half. However, those gaudy numbers are not possible without the Alabama offensive line winning the line of scrimmage, and that's the positive that needs to carry over in the rematch in the CFP title game. After giving up 7 sacks in their 24-22 win over Auburn in the Iron Bowl, they allowed 0 against a Georgia pass rush that had been averaging 3.4 sacks per game. They're also the reason Alabama was able to have any type of success running the football. 115 yards on 26 attempts. It's 4.4 per carry against a defense that was barely allowing over 80 yards per game and less than 3 yards per carry over the season. The Tide's offensive line did give up 2 sacks to the Cincinnati defense in Alabama's 27-6 Cotton Bowl win. And Young had a pretty pedestrian game, 17 of 28, 181 yards, only 6.5 yards per attempt, did throw a pick, but he also tossed 3 touchdowns, including a beautiful 44-yarder to Ja'Cory Brooks to put the Tide up 17-3 at the half. But Alabama didn't need an explosive game from their Heisman winner because the guys up front opened enough holes for Bama to run for 301 yards on 47 carries. That is 6.4 yards per rush against a team that allowed only 3.3 yards per rush all season. They rolled up 482 yards of offense against another really good defensive team. If the Alabama offensive line can win the line of scrimmage against Georgia, then Young will have all day to throw, and starting running back Brian Robinson may be able to put up better numbers on the ground than he did in the SEC title game. He only went for 16 carries for 55 yards, but to be fair, he was still recovering from a hamstring injury. They'll need him to do, better than that, as the Dogs, with Bama's number 1 wide receiver, John Mechie, out with a torn ACL, will focus their pass defense on taking away Jameson Williams, who has 75 catches for 1,507 yards and 15 TDs, and flat out destroyed Georgia with 7 for 184 and 2 scores in the SEC title game. They'll do that in an attempt to keep Young from once again making big plays in the passing game. I can't see Robinson getting anything like the career-high 204 yards on 26 carries, 7.8 per tote, as he did against the Bearcats, but they'll need 100-plus yards and 4.5-plus yards per carry from him to keep the Bama offense balanced and multidimensional. But it all starts with those 5 guys up front winning the line of scrimmage, opening holes for Robinson, and keeping a clean pocket for Young so he can attack somewhat suspect Georgia secondary. If they can do that, the Tide's going to roll once again.
Alabama. So one thing that needs to be mentioned in that game, in the SEC Championship game, Jameson did most of his damage when Mechie was already out, which is the even more surprising thing. And then you remember, Alabama has every good wide receiver. Like, you could get a guy who hasn't been on the team all year. He could step up in the national championship game easily. Just look at what happened. Just look at what happened with Tua 4 years ago. He didn't take a meaningful snap that whole entire season, and he led them to a national title victory. So Alabama's offensive really blooming over the last 5 years has made into what has almost been a monster. And in that Cincinnati game specifically, and really the Georgia game, they got everything clicking, and that's very scary. All right, Anthony, let's talk about the other side, Georgia, a team that seems like they've been tortured forever. Anthony, what did Georgia do back then that needs to be rectified, or else the next L to Alabama, which would be the 7th straight, will be coming on Monday?
Well, you want to talk about the fact that before that SEC championship game, we were talking about Georgia's defense being on a historic season and a campaign.
And they were.
I mean, they were only giving up 9.6 points a game, and they over just under 4 yards per play entirely. And then they got hit with not 1 but 2 haymakers and never recovered. You kind of been getting that SEC championship game. They were up 10-0 at one point. And then for whatever reason, I think the defense forgot that's Alabama on the other side. That's not a normal college team. And I think they treated it as such. And maybe the arrogance, the swagger gotten away and forgot that Nick Saban was one of the best in-game adjustment coaches in the land, because he adjusted and they got shredded. I mean, think about this. 41 points, 536 of total offense that Georgia Bulldog defense gave up. Did not record a sack. And this is a week after the Iron Bowl, where it seemed like Auburn was living in a backfield to the tune of 7 sacks in that game. So when you think about this, Bryce Young, they had to get pressure on Bryce Young. I mean, Bryce Young was only pressured 11 times on 44 pass attempts back on that December 4th game. And by the way, I had to really go back and look at the replay because that was the day after I got my booster shots. I was a little woozy in and out watching it live. So I had to go back and watch the replay earlier this week. But besides the point, Alabama was the first Georgia opponent to have a 50% offensive success rate on their plays. And also they had 13 big, you talk about the big play, Alabama had about 13 of those. So you saw in the Cotton Bowl against Cincinnati, what Cincinnati was able to do was they were able to take away the big play for the most part and kind of force Alabama's offense to run the ball and dink and dunk their way downfield. Only problem is Alabama successfully was able to do that. So Georgia's going to have to take away the big plays. Messi being out does help in some way, but like you said, the other receiver, Williams, lit them up after he was injured to close to 200 yards. So the secondary, a young secondary that, because the Georgia's front seven was so good all year, kind of was protected, got exposed badly in that SEC championship game. Alabama also converted 7 of 14 on third down. So that's another day that Georgia has to do better. As for where Cincinnati didn't do in the Cotton Bowl was get off the field on third down. Then you think about Georgia rebounding against Michigan. Granted, Michigan, sorry, Jay, they're not Alabama for what it's worth, but Georgia showed why they were good all season when there was a stretch where they forced 3 turnovers on 3 consecutive possessions. And Darian Kendrick, a guy, transferred over, that should be an interesting matchup if he matched up on Williams for most of the game. He looked like a guy who can shadow a receiver for the most part. And look, it doesn't help to have a guy, a shutdown receiver, potential shadow their best receiver at the very point where he's not going to have a mismatch the moment the ball is snapped. And that was another issue as well. Alabama pre-snap adjustments really seemed to catch Georgia off guard, and they weren't able to really adjust or really able to figure out how to kind of limit some of the miscommunications that was going on in the backfield, in the defensive backfield. Because you saw there was a lot of big plays in chunks given up. Alabama's defense, Georgia's defense is under the gun right now. It's a lot of pressure because they've been good all season, and they got hit with just a two-piece combo in that SEC championship game, and now we're wondering, okay, was that an aberration, or is that just how good Alabama's offense really is? And Kirby Smart right now, he's under the pressure. I mean, you think about what happened 4 years ago in 2018. You think about the fact that it is Alabama and that Georgia, since 1980 hasn't been able to get over that hump. And it's a lot of pressure right now. So Georgia is definitely under the gun going into this game Monday night.
Yep.
So fun fact here, and I realize this, since 2010, the national champion is either been Alabama or has had to go through Alabama all but one time. And that was Florida State winning in 2014. So in the true words of Ric Flair, to be the man, you have to beat the man. And the man is Nick Saban. Okay. And yes, the man is Nick Saban, which brings me to Nick Saban versus Kirby Smart. This year, in the final poll, 5 out of the top 15 teams were either coached by Nick Saban or coached by someone who had coached under Nick Saban before. Lane Kiffin, Mario Cristobal, and Mel Tucker were all Saban assistants at one point. The record. Nick Saban has only lost one time to a former assistant in a game, and that was this year at Texas A&M. It was such a big win that this Monday for the ESPN Coaching Megacast, they're not bringing all the coaches there. They're just bringing in Jimbo Fisher and the coaching staff to analyze, because they were the team that beat Alabama this year. Alabama has been a juggernaut and with Saban. And I think this has been one of Saban's most up and down seasons. They have another year coming out of Bryce Young. So you know what? There's no pressure on Alabama on Monday. You could just erect that statue a little bit higher if you're Nick Saban with another win. And another great thing about Saban is he's an underdog again. He's probably going to be an underdog of this game. Right now, the line is -3. Don't think it's going to get to even. It's probably going to stay in Georgia's favor. Nick Saban has only been an underdog 3 times in his entire career. And of course, I know you're shocked by this. They've won all 3 times. The SEC Championship in 2009 versus Florida, a 2015 regular season game against Georgia, and last month's SEC title game against Georgia. They didn't win those games. They won them by 19, 28, and 17 points respectively. So that's what Nick Saban thinks about the rat poison that comes out of the media and comes into the locker rooms. That is one of the best names I've ever heard for media, rat poison. But I will say this, Kirby Smart has, again, his best team ever. I think it's undeniable. There's a lot of talk about what he needs to do Monday, but I know that he is going to make sure he has a careful offensive plan because Stinson Bennett is not Bryce Young. Stinson Bennett is a senior semi-game manager, but can make the big play when he needs to. But this Alabama hump and this shadow of Nick Saban is huge. And if Kirby Smart doesn't do it this time, I think the Georgia fan base is going to legitimately question, are we ever going to win a title while Nick Saban is coaching? And that's a very scary thought because Nick Saban looks like he's having more fun on the sidelines, as much fun as Nick Saban can have fun that he has ever had. All right. Georgia, Alabama, National Championship, a game that is very exciting to everybody who's living in Georgia and Alabama, but everybody else has to live through it because SEC. Let's make quick predictions. Who do you think wins this game? And give me a final score.
I'll go first. Let me go first here, Anthony. I can cite, more numbers, records, and stats, specifically, Nick Saban versus his assistants, especially against Kirby Smart, as the rabbi mentioned. Here's a little trivia thing for you guys. Alabama hasn't lost to Georgia since 2007. That was Nick Saban's first season in Tuscaloosa. And the Tide's last neutral site loss to the Bulldogs was way back in 1984. But for me, guys,
the SEC championship was ever a thing.
Exactly. But for me, at the end of the day, Alabama is simply the better team, in my opinion. They have the best players on each side of the ball. Anderson's the best defensive player in college football. 33.5 tackles for losses. That's 11.5 more than the second most by any guy in the country. And he leads the country with 17.5 sacks. Had 1 against Georgia the last time they met, along with 2 tackles for losses. And Young is arguably the best offensive player at the most critical offensive position. So for me, guys, the Tide rolls again, though I do expect it to be a closer game than the SEC title game. I'm going to go Bama 31, Georgia 24. Bryce Young is the game MVP, and Nick Saban gets his 8th career title and his 7th at Bama, finally breaking his tie with the legendary Bear Bryant.
Finally breaking his tie. It's been 1 year since he's won a title. 1 season.
Yeah, for me, as much as I would like to see Georgia finally get over the hump, and one of my favorite ESPN personalities, L. Duncan, have something to celebrate Monday night, I don't see it happening. Look, Nick Saban just does not normally lose to his proteges, and it shows. I mean, the first time he loses is literally this season. I mean, people are going to walk up to Jimbo Fisher the same way they walked up to Tom Coughlin after Super Bowl 42 and just ask him how. But I got Alabama 31-17 over Georgia. Bryce Young MVP. Thanos collect another Infinity Stone for his gauntlet to add to his collection. So I think Alabama is just too good. And it's almost like putting them as an underdog is an insult to them. It's not even a compliment. It's more like a slap in the face.
Last thing you need to do is give Alabama bulletin board material by making them the underdog.
Exactly. And I think Nick Saban will just immediately show that to the team and just give them all of the credit. Yeah, I was actually going to pick Georgia until I saw that Alabama was a favorite. And then I realized that as much as Alabama does deserve to be an underdog in some of these situations, they have played bad game. They have played less than stellar games all year. The Auburn game, they almost lost to LSU. They almost lost to Florida. And all of those three teams finished under 500 or under. So that is very unlike Alabama. They almost lost to Arkansas in a shootout. So it's warranted that they should be struggling. But it's Alabama, and they're in a national championship game, and Deshaun Watson is not on the other sideline, I think, or Trevor Lawrence. So all of those things coming in, I like Alabama beating Georgia in a close game by the exact same score as they won the 2018 national title game, 26-23.
All right. Who's your game MVP? Who's your game MVP?
There's really never an MOP in these games, but I'll go with Bryce Young. It's the simple pick because quarterbacks always win. All right, let's move on. It's true. It's damn true. We'll talk about that in just a second. All right, on to the pros. And the NFL season feels like it has been going on forever. But the season finale will be taking place today, Jan 8th, and tomorrow, Jan 9th. Still some big matchups to look at, and one of them is not Giants football team. Sorry, we don't do that here. Jay, what are you looking forward to as we go through our season finale?
I'm looking at the Rams and the Niners, and to me, this is the must-see matchup as far as I'm concerned. The NFC West crown is on the line, as is one of the final NFC wildcard spots. The 49ers get in with a win or a Saints loss. If they get in, they'll be either the 6th seed or the 7th seed. The Rams are currently the 2 seed. They can clinch the NFC West with a win or a Cardinals loss. If the Rams win, they keep the 2 seed. If they lose, they could fall as far as the 5 seed. Rams are coming off a come-from-behind 2019 win over the Ravens that was highlighted by Cooper Kupp, 6 catches for 95 yards and a touchdown, which pretty much put the Rams' new single-season records for catches, 138, yards, 1,829, and TDs, 15 into the stratosphere. He leads the NFL in all 3 categories this season, and he could set a new NFL record for catches and yards this week. It was low-lighted, however, by a second straight 3-turnover game by Matthew Stafford, 2 interceptions, including his 4th pick 6 of the season and a lost fumble. It took 2 late touchdown drives by the offense. The game winner came with 57 seconds left, Stafford hitting OBJ for a 7-yard score, and several red zone stops by the defense for the Rams to escape with the W. 49ers took care of their business, beating the Texans last week 23-7 in Trey Lance's first home start. Kid was 16-23, 249 yards, 2 scores, 1 pick. The latest update has Jimmy Garoppolo, who has a torn ligament in his right thumb, likely to start as it seems he was fully able to practice this week, throwing with little difficulty. Either way, the 49ers should be able to lean on their running game. Elijah Mitchell had 119 yards on 21 carries, 5.7 yards per carry, as the Rams have struggled in that area, meaning stopping the run, of late. They allowed the Ravens to put up 165 yards on the ground and allowed them to average 5.2 yards per carry. These teams met back in week 10 on Monday night, and the 49ers had their way with the Rams in a 31-10 win. Stafford threw for 243 yards, but averaged 5.9 per attempt through only 1 TD against 2 picks. The Rams managed just 52 yards on the ground while allowing the 49ers to run for 156. Granted, the 49ers only averaged 3.5 per carry, but it allowed them to win time of possession by almost double, 39:03 to 20:57. Garoppolo didn't light it up through the air, but he was efficient and effective, going 15 of 19, 182 yards and 2 scores, and leading the Niners to the win. The 49ers are 5-0 against the Rams when Jimmy G has taken the snaps, and his ability to get rid of the ball quickly. He averaged only 2.3 seconds between snap and release in the Monday Night Football win, helped neutralize the Rams pass rush led by Aaron Donald and Von Miller. That said, the Rams have the more talented team, and if they don't shoot themselves in the foot, meaning that Matthew Stafford plays more like the guy who was 23 of 30 for 287 yards, 3 TDs and no picks, and averaged 9.6 yards per attempt in the 30-23 win over the Cardinals in week 14, then the Rams have a pretty good chance to take home the W and secure the number 2 seed. Both teams have a lot to play for, which makes it the matchup to watch as far as I'm concerned.
You're right, on a lot of different levels, but it's interesting. That week 10 matchup was one of those matchups where the Niners were struggling. I think they were 3-5 going into that game. And that was OBJ's first game too. Looked very lost in that game whatsoever, but that team has improved. That team has clicked. That team still looks very shoddy. at times, and it's going to be very interesting to see how this can catapult them. Rams being a 4 seed could mean a one and done. Rams being a 2 seed could mean the easy train to an eventual Green Bay NFC Championship matchup. All right, Anthony, what's your
well, obviously, I'm honoring the late great John Madden, who covered a lot of NFC East matchups in his heyday. I'm picking the Saturday night game, which is later this evening, by the way, if you're watching this live. The Cowboys going to Philadelphia to take on the Eagles. Now, still playing things up for grabs in this one. The Cowboys with a win and a couple of losses outside of the control can actually move up to the 3 and maybe the 2 seed. Philadelphia with a win and a 49ers loss can actually move up to the number 6 seed. Right now, they're both 4 and Cowboys and Eagles are 4 and 7 seeds respectively. And for all we know, this could be a wild card matchup next weekend. Also, if things, go fall in a kooky way as far as seeding among the other NFC teams. Now, here's the thing: it's a battle between momentum and war patricia. For the Eagles, they have over 10 guys in COVID protocol going into this game. So it's more like survival and let's get the hell out of this game so we can get our guys back and get ready for the wild card game. Devontae Smith, however, and I hate to pour salt on a wound of Giant fans. Remember how we kind of wanted Devontae Smith. We thought we was going to get him, and the Eagles kind of leapfrogged us and got him instead. Yeah, he's close to 1,000 yards, can actually break the Eagles rookie receiving record held by Deshaun Jackson later this afternoon. Could be the first 1,000-yard receiver the Eagles had since Zach Ertz in 2018. Ezekiel Elliott with a chance to go over 1,000 yards for the first time in 3 seasons as well. But also, you think about the Cowboys offense. They're still the number 2 offense in the league and number 1 scoring offense overall, but they have like nothing like the offensive juggernaut. Stands for the demolition of the Washington football team. They haven't looked consistent really in the second half of the year. I mean, you think about guys being in and out of COVID protocol. Dak Prescott's accuracy is taking a nosedive in many cases. The offensive line hasn't been nearly as good, so he hasn't gotten as much time. And that's kind of important because you think about what happens if the Cowboys stay into that 4th spot. More likely to make it a Rams team that has a great front 7 and a pass rush, or a Cardinals team that's welcoming back J.J. Watt that just adds to that pass rush, and you can't protect that Prescott. That could be problems for an offense that has really not been in sync the last several weeks of the season. And they are just trying to lose this game now. Mike McCarthy said the guys are going to play. We don't know how long they're going to play. That's a different conversation in itself. But they gotta get something going on offense because they looked so bad for 3 quarters last week against that Arizona Cardinals defense. And then they finally took them on the 4th quarter. It's just the inconsistency with a Cowboy team that put up 41 points against Philadelphia earlier this year has been kind of maddening when you think about how good they were through the first 9-10 games of the season. The Eagles offense, we didn't think they knew how to run the ball. They're the number 1 rushing offense in the NFL. That's a great credit to Nick Sirianni, who finally figured out, hey, you know what? Maybe I can get some help with the running game and be actually like a semi-decent coach. So I think the game tonight is pretty much a matter for the Cowboys. It's trying to just kind of clean things up, try to pick up some kind of momentum. For the Eagles, it's more like building on what they've done. They won 4 in a row. They've obviously like a team that can be very dangerous considering they do have the kind of Russian offense that thrives in the postseason and in bad weather conditions, depending on where they go. This will be very interesting tonight to see how things play out as far as who wins, but also the rest of the weekend as well. They may land when the weekend is over and we start seeing the wildcard matchups.
So let me get this straight. Your matchup to watch is a game where Mike McCarthy doesn't actually know how long his starters are going to play. Okay. Well, good talk. Yeah. Good talk. Okay.
And it's NFC East, Eagles, Cowboys. I mean, come on, just that alone is enough. That's worth watching.
let's charter the jet back to the West Coast, or sort of the West Coast, and talk about the pretty much winner-take-all game on Sunday night between the Los Angeles Chargers and the Las Vegas Raiders. And I say pretty much because unless Jacksonville beats Indianapolis, its winner gets into the playoffs, loser is out. There has been so much talk in the media this week of if Indy actually loses to Jacksonville, that this could be a tie and both teams would get in, and both have denied it. It is the stupidest conversation I have ever seen on any media talk show ever. Two teams are not playing for a tie. They want to eliminate the other. Let's move on. Derek Carr and Justin Herbert are both fighting, believe it or not, to get into the playoffs, to start their first ever playoff game. Remember, Carr got into the playoffs a couple of years ago, but he got injured week 16. So he's trying to do it with this team now. The Raiders are actually a really good story considering all of the shit that they've gone through this year, with John Gruden basically showing his true colors of what type of a human he really is, and the Henry Ruggs incident. When you lose your best wide receiver, it's not a really good thing. Rich Bisaccia has done a very good job. They've won their last 3 games, all given they were weaker opponents, a weaker Cleveland team that was missing both of their QBs, but they got the job done. A Denver team without Teddy Bridgewater, but they got the job done. And an Indianapolis team that didn't know until 24 hours before that they would have Carson Wentz. But in all 3 of these cases, they got the job done. And now they're hosting basically a playoff game. And they're underdogs to this Chargers team because at its best form, this Chargers team is a very good team. They beat the Chiefs earlier this year and could have easily beat the Chiefs again in week 15. This Los Angeles team has so many weapons. You have Austin Eckler, who's gone for 11 touchdowns this year and has killed for my wife's fantasy football team. Wanted to give him a quick plug. You have Keenan Allen and Mike Williams, 167 catches respectively, 1,086 yards and 1,027 yards respectively. And Austin Eckler also catches balls too. He has 65 receptions this year. You look at the Raiders receiving core. Darren Waller has been out for weeks. There is a possibility he's going to come back in this game. Even though he's been been out since Thanksgiving, he still has 643 yards. And when he is in the game, he is somebody who is basically someone who you focus your first and second option to, because Renfrow is easily a top 5 pass catcher in the NFL. And Hunter Renfrow, my God, what a story he's been. 99 catches this year for 1,025 yards. He has literally kept this team afloat the second half of the season with his receiving. He has been everywhere. But the one thing that is just amazing in this game, and I know the Chargers destroyed the Raiders in week 4, is what the numbers of these QBs are. Justin Herbert's thrown for 4,000. Remember, they've had the same amount of games pretty much. Justin Herbert, 4,631 yards. Carr, 4,618. 289.4 yards per game. 288.6 yards per game for Carr. 14 interceptions for Herbert. 14 interceptions for Carr. The only difference is Herbert has thrown 14 more touchdowns and has a little bit better of a QBR rating. But overall, Herbert in his second year is looking to make the leap and get into the playoffs and prove that the Chargers in the playoffs can easily win a playoff game. And Derek Carr is looking to really make chicken salad off of the chicken S that hasn't happened this season and get himself into the playoffs for the first time and kind of elevate his stats. Hopefully both teams can put up a classic here, and hopefully they're not fit to be tied.
Hey, Anthony talked about how John Madden would appreciate, the Dallas Philly game because he had so many NFC East games. He will appreciate your matchup as well, Rabbi, because that is an old school rivalry that goes all the way back to the AFL days. So he would appreciate that one too.
Yeah, except there's been like 17 moves in between those AFL days and now.
That's fair, but they're still wearing the same powder blue unis with a light on a white helmet. So
they don't do the powder blue unis anymore, which is kind of frustrating for me. All right, let's move on.
Madden would still
appreciate it, though. Rest in peace, my friend. This week is probably meaningless to the final voting, but it seems to be a rite of passage to talk about the MVP of this season, as the regular season and voting period is coming to an end. And even though this is always a one-track reward quarterback, we have a little bit of a mishmash this year on our picks. And let's start with you.
You know, where would the Indianapolis Colts be without Jonathan Taylor this season? I mean,
Absolutely.
Yeah, AJ Peterson was the last running back to win league MVP. This was his 2,000-yard campaign in 2012. But Jonathan Taylor this season, there was 16 games. Obviously, got one more to go this weekend. 1,734 yards, 18 touchdowns, 37 catches for 342, and 2 additional touchdowns as a receiver. He is gone. The Colts are 9-1 when he's rushed for over 100 yards. Of course, we talked about on our year-end show the 5-touchdown game he had up in Orchard Park against the Bills. And you think about this, he actually has more total touchdowns than 2 whole teams into Week 14. I'm quite sure, more than likely, one of those 2 teams is got to be either the Giants or Jets because, we all see the New York teams. They're atrocious offensively, to say the least. But you think about this.
Let's move on.
Yeah, 1,213 yards after contact, which is 8 more than Joe Mixon of the Cincinnati Bengals have total. Through 16 games, he's tied for the most consecutive games with a rushing touchdown in a single season. He has scored in 11 straight games. He set the Colts single-season rushing touchdown record with 18, which surpassed Lenny Moore's mark of 16. He has a chance to he did eclipse Adrian James' franchise record for yards in a season. Look, we know quarterbacks are the glamour position for what it's worth, but to Jonathan Taylor's season and what he has been able to do, when you think about Carson Wentz, somewhat erratic play at times, and you think about the Colts kind of hanging in there, Jonathan Taylor's been that offense. And if he, like I said, he goes as far as the Colts go as far as he can carry them, and no pun intended on that one. Just about running back, I'm a little biased in this conversation. But yeah, I mean, Jonathan Taylor is going to be a fun watch going into the postseason. And it's going to be interesting to see whoever the Colts do play, how do they game plan for him, because he's just as good a receiver out of the backfield as he is as a runner. So it's going to be very interesting to see just how teams start the game plan around stopping Jonathan Taylor and how he can adapt and adjust and still be an effective runner moving forward.
Need to still beat the Colts, beat the Jaguars before that's even an option. Yes, Anthony. Don't count your chickens before they hatch. They might not have to plan for any of them. All right. So in baseball, when Miguel Cabrera hit for the Triple Crown, nobody questioned him winning the MVP. Yes. Say yes. That makes us mad, but whatever. Anyway, apparently only 4 wide receivers in the history of the NFL have led the so-called receiving Triple Crown. That would be catches, yards receiving, and touchdown catches. And no one has done it in 16 years. By the way, the only 3 are Jerry Rice in 1990, Sterling Sharp in 1992, and Steve Smith in 2005. Cooper Kupp is about to do that and where would the Rams be without Cooper Kupp this year? Jay talked about it before. Matthew Stafford has been wildly inconsistent this year at a lot of points, but Cooper Kupp, who has 138 receptions, 1,829 yards receiving, and 15 touchdown catches, is about as automatic can be. If Tom Brady had Cooper Kupp, I have a feeling those numbers would be double. But I'm just saying. But Cooper Kupp, without Robert Woods for basically half of the year, without really a steady, Stafford has always been just a shaky quarterback this year, but it seems like when he throws it to Cooper Kupp, Kupp just gets it in every way, shape, or form. He has at least 7 catches in 14 games and has scored in 10 different games. What definition of an MVP can you get? You need Cooper Kupp to win the game, pretty much. I think as a wide receiver, it's tough for a wide receiver to win MVP, but in a year where I think the quarterbacks kind of cancel each other out, and we'll talk about the other one in just a second, I think what Cooper Kupp does is on the field is amazing, considering how out of nowhere he's come in from being the ultimate Cole Beasley, but vaccinated slot receiver out there to being what is essentially the next coming of Jerry Rice, Sterling Sharp, and every big-time wide receiver that we've ever had in this league. Cooper Kupp is a study of the game. In fact, Kupp said he doesn't consider these records because he knows he has that extra game. And I appreciate someone who understands what the meaning of this game actually is. It has nothing to do with his MVP case. But I think Cooper Kupp has been the most impactful wide receiver that we've seen in a season in about a decade. And I'm not even seeing this in fantasy football numbers. I think Cooper Kupp definitely deserves consideration for the MVP. But he's a wide receiver. He's not a quarterback, Jay. And we all know that the quarterback that has been tearing up the NFL this year is one A-Rod.
Yeah, I know this is the captain obvious pick here, but with as quarterback centric as this award has been, as the rabbi has noted, you can't have an honest NFL MVP conversation without the Packers quarterback. Say what you want about the off the field stuff, and we said plenty on this show in 2021, but the numbers Rodgers has put up this season are MVP level. 68.6% completion percentage, 3,977 yards with 265.1 per game, 7.8 yards per attempt, 35 touchdowns against only 4 interceptions, and a league-leading 111.1 passer rating through 15 games. 10 times he's had a better than 100 passer rating in a game. 6 times he's topped 125. He has the highest touchdown percentage and the lowest interception percentage in the game, tied for the third most touchdown passes, tied for the least number of interceptions. And he's first in True Media's expected points added play per statistic. That is one of the big next-gen stats being thrown around in the NFL these days. He's thrown 3 TDs or more in a game 6 times and didn't throw a pick in any of those games. In fact, he's only thrown 2 interceptions since the Week 1 loss to New Orleans, which is his worst game of the season and one of the only 2 games that he has not thrown a touchdown. That's 485 attempts and only 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions since Week 1. The Packers offense has scored less than 24 points in a game only 3 times this season, and Rodgers is a large part of why. And now, thanks to Hub Arkush, the executive editor of Pro Football Weekly, we can't have an NFL MVP conversation about Aaron Rodgers without debating whether the off-the-field stuff should factor into MVP voting. I'm not going to get too deep into the weeds on Arkush's comments about why he wouldn't vote for Rodgers or whether the media should even be voting on any sports league awards like NFL MVP. But I will say I completely disagree with him on all levels. How you comport yourself off the field is irrelevant, as the only criteria that matters for NFL Most Valuable Player or any award is how you do between the white lines of the gridiron. Is it possible that some of the 50 reporters across the country tabbed by the Associated Press to vote for the NFL's Most Valuable Player will be so offended by how Rodgers epically mishandled everything about his vaccination status, or as we found out, the lack thereof, and the aftermath of that, Joe Rogan, that it'll play into how they choose to vote? I guess they're only human, but unlike Arkush, I doubt any of them will be so vehemently open about it. We've covered Aaron Rodgers and the Packers for years on this show, and even before the whole vax thing blew up, we were giving him grief for all the drama he caused in the offseason leading up to the current season, and it wasn't even the first time we've gotten on his case for off-the-field nonsense. That said, there has never been any doubt that he's one of the best to ever play the position, and that's why he's in the MVP conversation almost every year, and rightly so. This season is no different, and if he manages to beat the field for the award, he'll have earned it with his performance on the field, because, as I said, that's the only criteria that matters.
It is, but here's the thing about those off-the-field incidents this year. All of the crap that he did before the season led into that first game versus the Saints, and they look like crap. That's a loss. All of the vaccination stuff that happened led to Jordan Love starting on 5 days rest against a hot Chiefs team. That's a loss. That's 2 losses that can be caused by the actions of Aaron Rodgers. I understand completely what you do on the between the white lines, as you said, is definitely is always going to be the main focus. However, those actions that you have said have literally cost them games this year. You can put those actions to it. I think overall everything balances out. However, also, what about Barry in the MLB? Barry Bonds is a jerk. Yes, he's done steroids, but Barry Bonds is not getting into the Hall of Fame also because of people not liking him. Kirk Schilling is not getting into the Hall of Fame because he's a dick. And that's the thing that needs to be said.
Well, here, Rabbi, that may be all well and good, but here's the thing. We all know, as much as Aaron Rodgers annoys the hell out of us with the crap that he pulls, and yeah, you can say that, there's some causation to the correlation that these two things led to the only two Packer losses this season. They're still the NFC's number one.
There's a third one, but still, that's the two ones.
But
those are that cost.
We all know Aaron Rodgers is going to Canton when he retires, and he's going to be a first ballot guy. So in the larger scheme of things, this is this.
What I'm trying to say is, I think the seasons that they've had is much more closer, and it either can be a tiebreaker for me or the reason why I would notch one over the other. I'm not dinging Aaron Rodgers and taking him off of my ballot entirely. And what Herb Arkush did was just stupid to say out in the open. That was really, really dumb. You can vote out secretly for whatever you do.
You notice how he tried to somewhat walk it back.
He had to walk it back. He had to walk it back.
You
can't say stuff like that as a member of the media.
And Aaron Rodgers is right. I don't know about you. I don't know how much of a name this guy is in the media.
He's a name that has been known in the community. It's a decent name.
But when Aaron Rodgers, who pretty much gets covered by everybody in the United States, says, "I have no idea who this guy is. I've never talked to this guy. This guy doesn't know me. I've never heard of this guy before." And we all between the three of us. Any of you guys ever heard of this guy before?
I have heard of him.
No, I haven't heard of him, but the fact that he is from a Chicago beat writer, kind of like how much Bears bias this plays into just semi a little bit. Like
there you go. That's something I can't.
Post beat writer or insider that had a little semi bias against a player or a team for that matter. Look, Aaron Rodgers loses a little cool points to me because of the whole toe thing. Okay, that's something nobody wants to see ever again.
Oh God, let's. I'm moving on. You're cut off. You're cut off. No toe.
And look, the Bears bias may be something there. And even if it wasn't for the other stuff, right? If all he said was that I think Rodgers is a jerk with that comment about owning the Bears, okay, I get it. But when he launched into everything else and and this makes him a jerk, and a jerk shouldn't win MVP, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
that logic doesn't apply here.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
I'm with Jay on this one. If you can't separate the player from the person, then you shouldn't have a vote as far as who his MVP is. Because it's like, look, we know Barry Bonds' personality. We know he's a jerk. We know he's aloof when it comes to media personalities. But you gotta separate that from when he's able to do when he steps on the field and just how good of a player he really is. Because we're talking about the player, not the person. Okay, Michael Jordan's won a lot of MVPs. Not a great person, but one of the great, arguably the greatest basketball player of all time. So for me, I could just kind of separate the two to kind of make it a little easier on myself.
You can separate.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people can't do that though.
It's hard because there's a vacuum, and that vacuum sucks everything in. Like I said, baseball people can't do it in the media. And honestly, unless you're a juror that's going into a courtroom, you can't actually do it if you are a media member. So the facts are there. Unfortunately, if one air doesn't get rid of everybody in the MVP voting, you're going to have people who feel that way. But I do think Aaron Rodgers probably deserves the MVP. He's kind of stood himself out over the last few weeks. But again, you can take it into effect when it affects gameplay.
Yeah. So who goes to the award? Jake from State Farm? Who presents that to him? Does he have to Aaron Rodgers deal with that MVP award? I just want to know.
No, everybody gets the Patrick Price. Moving on. All right. Finally.
It's
the Patrick Price. Finally, Antonio Brown, who in the course of 6 days has gone from the Tampa Bay Bucks top 2 wide receiver, and possibly most important wide receiver on the field, to stripping his clothes off during a game against the Jets and walking out, giving the peace sign, having an injury but walking around as normal at a Nets game and everywhere else, trying to ask a police escort for a ride and the escort saying no, throwing social media shade at Bruce Arians and Tom Brady confidant Alex Guerrero, questioning his relationship to Tom Brady on social media. I added that today because this was after I wrote it. And of course, sharing his bank information online accidentally. That happened just a week in the life of Antonio Brown. Jay.
He'll be hearing from a Nigerian prince in about 5 minutes.
I think he thinks he is the Nigerian prince who's sending out the emails. All right, so Jay, Antonio is safely not going to be at least playing again this season, and maybe not ever again. Take your final I told you so rant for 2022.
And I don't want to say I told you also, but I told you also. Antonio Brown, for all of his skills on the field, and they are considerable, has had an expiration date on being a good teammate ever since Mike Tomlin decided he'd had enough and the Steelers showed AB the door. And what subsequently happened with the NFL, with the Patriots, with the Raiders, should have given everyone else in the NFL pause, including Tom Brady. Everyone else, every one of us in Steeler Nation saw this coming. If TB12 didn't think it would happen, he was deluding himself. Antonio Brown doesn't think he needs help or that there's anything wrong with him. That's the impression he's given in the wake of every one of his meltdowns. So I'm sorry, Tom. I have no sympathy for AB. He doesn't deserve it. He's never taken any responsibility for any of it. It's never his fault. He's always the victim. The way he's portraying Bruce Arians is simply the latest in an all too familiar pattern. When you're walking off the field shirtless, doing jumping jacks in the end zone while the game was still being played, your argument about how much pain your ankle is in holds no weight with me. That he was annoyed that he wasn't getting enough targets, even though no other player had more than him, and throwing a temper tantrum about it is very on brand for AB, as is the whole faking a vaccination card thing. It's a total all about...
You forget about the faking the vaccination card thing throughout this whole thing. This is only his second game back.
Let me finish. It's a total all about me move, which is also very on brand for AB, and that's what I was getting at. He is as selfish and narcissistic as anyone who has ever donned an NFL jersey and is the very definition of a bad teammate. The Bucs didn't need him to win the Super Bowl last season, and they'll be just fine without him as they attempt to defend their crown. Rabbi, I know what you're saying, and I know how well you played.
Go back to me afterward. All
right? That's just my take on it, all right? I hope that this is the last time we are contractually obligated to talk about Antonio Brown on this show. Talking about him is exhausting, and as the show's resident Steeler fan, I'm the in-house subject matter expert on all things AB, and frankly, gents, it's a title I'd like to remove from my resume. The NFL needs to put him back on the commissioner's exempt list and leave him there. Playing in the NFL is a privilege, and AB's needs to be revoked permanently.
Okay, first of all, yes, I understand rant done. AB is still a talent on the field, and obviously everything outweighs the talent now, but they needed him last year. He caught a damn touchdown in the Super Bowl and is definitely a good player to have on the field. He's not necessarily a good teammate, and he's not a good standard to the league itself, and is a joke, but his talent cannot be suppressed. And if
I said nothing about that. I did not denigrate his talent.
Last year, and they needed him last year because it's obvious they needed him at least a portion last year. Anthony, pile on.
Yeah, I think I said this on Instagram, and we kind of revisit the fact. Think about this is the same thing that happened with the Steelers. It was Mike Thomas' fault. It was Ben Roethlisberger's fault. It's Juju Smith-Schuster's fault. He goes to Oakland. Oh, Oakland's a bad team. He leaves $30 million guaranteed on the table, and is then complaining about why he's playing on a center-based contract. Then he goes to New England. He gets cut because of the all domestic and sexual assault allegations that comes out. It's the women's fault. He throws the mother of his son under the bus on social media. Let's not forget that. Then he takes time off. Tom Brady brings him in, leaves him in his house, goes to Tampa Bay. The fake vaccination card. Who gets caught with a fake vaccination card in Florida of all places? I have no idea, but only Antonio Brown managed to do that. And now this. And then he's so hurt. His ankle is killing him. He's got bone spurs. He's patrolling out of his leg for peace sake. He goes to the next game, has dinner with rapper Fabulous. Oh, wait a minute. Let me produce that. Let me repeat that. Fabulous, the Fabulous Fabulous of Death Warranty. I had to put him a plug. Okay, he's from Brooklyn, but then he's in so much pain. He's taking so many painkillers. And Shannon Sharp, I had to point this out. You don't want to take the vaccination, but you don't know what the hell you just got injected with in your ankle as far as a painkiller. I don't know. And then he's walking around shooting music videos, and he's going to drop a mixtape this week. You know, for a guy who's hurt, Wolverine would be very, very envious of this healing factor that Antonio Brown had. And look, I had people all week arguing me down, moving the goalposts as far as defending Antonio Brown and giving me all kinds of excuses as, oh, you know how NFL does its players and forcing them to play her, or all the way down to, well, we always keeping the black man down, to, well, you don't know how you know what he was rejected with. The only thing they have is cortisone shots, as far as I'm concerned. Unless he was injected with gamma radiation, I don't want to hear anything. Look, exactly. Antonio Brown had the absolute goal on a podcast to talk about holding teams accountable. With your rap sheet, when the hell are you ever accountable for anything? That would be like, look, Antonio Brown is the young man who hits his classmates. You see him with your own 2 eyes, and then he has to know that and say you have no idea what you're talking about. It's never his fault in his world, which is sad because the same people on social media who are laughing and giggling about him running off the field and all this are going to be the same ones passing judgment and throwing stones. And God forbid he runs into some kind of financial trouble down the line because the money dries up, or as I like to say, the money start jumping funny a little bit when you realize you ain't got it as much as you think you do. Look, I don't know what kind of, and I really wish people stop throwing this whole mental illness thing out there so willy-nilly. If he needs help, he has to be the one to come to grips with that and say something's not right. I need to seek some kind of professional help. But in the meantime, can we stop making excuses for a guy like this behavior? And yes, for my friend out there who said, oh, if you want to be an ESPN personality, ESPN analyst, just say so. You don't have to work for a sports network to know someone's an asshole. We've all surrounded ourselves about 2 or 3 of those in our lifetime. So I will put that out there. Look, Antonio Brown is a guy who has just never been held accountable, and his behavior personifies that. Until that day comes, it's going to be the same problem, the same nonsense. Look, and I like this. I say the same thing with Chad Johnson. He's going to get another opportunity, so he's no longer productive. Then his career is officially over because there's going to be one GM who's going to think, you know what, he can help us win. Maybe he'll be on his best behavior, and it never fails. Look, I put him in the same category with Kyrie Irving. I don't have to argue my points. Their behavior is going to do it for me anyway, so why waste time? I just wish people stop moving the goalposts and trying to treat him like some kind of charity case or the world's greatest victim for self-made inflicted wounds that he's done, not just on his career, but because of the allegations, his own personal life. I mean, let's just face it. Antonio Brown is the only reason Antonio Brown is in this mess. 5 years ago, we're talking about first ballot Hall of Famer. And to this, all right, when you're making Bruce Arians, who's a bit of a dick, look like a sane person, when you make Randy Moss and Terrell Owens look like choir boys, you're doing something absolutely wrong, okay? Yeah. Like, let's just put it like this. Antonio Brown can't possibly be that hurt when he needed some kind of surgery. Oh, but wait a minute. You got plenty of time going on a podcast. You're clearly filming yourself walking with no limp whatsoever. This is how criminals get busted on social media for stealing PPP loans, because they're flaunting on social media and telling on themselves. Whatever argument that Antonio Brown may have had goes out the window each day he does something more dramatic and stupid. And you want to talk about taking shots at Tom Brady and biting the hand that feeds you? I don't know what else to say. When the guy who was literally going out of his way to help you, and you turn on him too, you turn on Mike Evans it's like I said, in Antonio Brown's world, he's never at fault. He's always the victim. And you know what, guys like that, unfortunately, it never turns out well in the long run. I hope for his sake, at some point, he grows up and realizes that an all-pro talent with a Pop Warner maturity level is never going to get anywhere far after a while. But what can I say? I mean, we've seen this story before, and it sucks because we know what kind of player he is, but the person is undermining the talent right now, and it's going to be the person that undermines everything else in that life, and unless he just get a grip, grow up, finally.
Wow,
Okay.
Rabbi, I never expected Anthony to outrant me on Antonio Brown, but Anthony.
Yeah. All I'm going to say is this. You know how you can get Antonio Brown to stop acting stupid? Not talk about it on social media. That's the only way, honestly. So you know what? If you keep talking about Antonio Brown, it's going to be like Candyman. Appears 5 times, and he's going to terrorize social media for another week. So you know what? Whether he has a mental illness, whether he has CTE, whatever the fuck he has,
Whether or not he just, as Anthony said, whether or not he's just simply an asshole.
He might be simply an asshole, whatever he has, but the best way to get rid of a bully is to stop talking about a bully. So you know what? That's it. Show over. All right. So for Jay Kaplan, Anthony Strait, LSU 2012 football, Jackson Smith and Jigba, because we haven't talked about a guy who went for 14 catches, 376 yards, and 5 touchdowns in the Rose Bowl. I think it was 6 touchdowns, actually. Good for him, even though he's a Buckeye.
But Marvin Harrison's kid, by the way, who runs routes just like his good old dad, by FYI.
My God. Ohio State really is wide receiver U. We should really talk about that more than the last segment. Anyway, for Rat Poison, that annoying Katy Perry song that I see every single time I see a CFP National Championship promo, Hub Arkush, Fabulous, Shannon Sharp, Bruce Arians, who, as Anthony told us, is a little bit of a dick, and both me and Jay's mixtapes, which are apparently dropping next week. I'm Stephen Rabinowitz, and this has been another edition of On the Sports Lines. To see this show that you do on demand, youtube.com/On the Sports Lines. If you want to see this show live, facebook.com/On the Sports Lines, and
on Twitter, our handle is ONTH Sports Lines, where you will see the link to this show and links to other interesting sports-related stuff that we think you should take a look at.
All right, I gotta go watch some football while thinking about what lyrics to write for my mixtape. Again, it drops later this week, apparently. For everyone on the Sports Lines, peace.
Peace. Enjoy your Saturday, everybody.